I'm your host, Nancy Trader. Welcome to the Stop Digging podcast, where we'll help you dig out of whatever hole you're in. Here, you can connect with experts to listen and learn from their experience and get advice for your challenges in business, wellness organizations, and relationships. Here, you can borrow from others and find what you need to create the life and work you want. Welcome back, listeners, to the Stop Digging podcast. I'm Susan, your host for today, and I'm excited about our topic today. We've been working on a theme this year with all of our guests called Global Works, and that encompasses not just people that are working in a field or an industry that is international, but also people that are in work or doing work that is holistic, that is covering like a whole person, the global person or the global industry or the global company. And it's a deeper work. And so I'm excited to have somebody today who actually does both. And we'll get into that in a minute. But as usual, I go through all of the research and the boring stuff first. And just so you understand the kind of impact that our guests have in the fields that they're contributing to. First of all, we're going to be talking about industries and toxic work environments. And we throw that around a lot. We all have hard days at work. There are ups and downs, but there are reported toxic work environments. And I was actually surprised at some of the numbers. 1 in 5 workers globally, not just in the United States, but globally, experience toxic work environments. And when we say toxic work environments, that's just not a bad day. That means every day is a battle. And it means that workers are experiencing so much stress that they almost can't function and perform in their jobs. That's what a toxic work environment is. It changes your brain and it changes how you're functioning. That is staggering to me. 20% of the entire world is working below performance in high stress, high toxic environments. Along with that, I find, according to the American Psychological Association, that 22% of employees in the United States are in toxic work environments that have harmed their mental health. That means that not only is it toxic in their workplace, but it is also affecting their home life and the rest of their world. Their mental health that they're taking away from their workplace is actually destroying the rest of their life too. And this was surprising to me, and it may be to you also, listeners, is that 94% in the automotive industry, of all industries, said that their workplace was toxic, and 70% of them said that they were leaving their jobs. That is a huge turnover rate in the automotive industry. That wouldn't have been something that I would have pegged as being a toxic work environment, but that is significant. Beyond that, I started looking at what about the people at the top? We're talking about work environments and companies. And I think, what about all these leaders that are supposed to be leading these places? And so I started looking at CEOs. And one of the most significant things I found is that their jobs are also highly stressful. And many of you think they're compensated well enough to handle it. We're all human. And what I found was that the divorce rate among executives is astronomical. At any given year, there are 20% of all executives are getting divorces, and most of them are repeat divorces. That was shocking to me, but not surprising. If you're putting all of your life into work and your work is stressful and you're not functioning properly and you're not interacting properly, how can you maintain your family and your marriage? So those are some things that are happening. Again, listeners, that I put all of our research in our LinkedIn group, Stop Digging, Self-Development. And if you want to join that and check out these resources and these links, that's great. I found out, and again, according to the Pollock Peacemakers organization in 2024, 85% of companies in the United States have dealt with severe conflict within their workplace. And they are losing every single year $359 billion due to conflicts in their workplace. That is one expensive conflict, folks. And if you've been part of that conflict, it's not pretty for those who are in it either. All you have to do is think about any literature or story you've ever read, tragedy, farce, comedy. It's all created around people that with a simple conversation could have cleared something up,
could have left peaceably. No drama, no toxicity, no deaths, no suicides, no nothing. Maybe even not even some laughs at some farces. But I'm excited about today's guest because she is on the forefront of changing all of that. And it is research based. You may have heard of neuroscience, neurobiology, neurodiversity, and it is all based on that. And it has been hugely successful. I know I've been through their program and it is amazing. I can definitely attest to that. Employees who are happy, who perform well, and who stay engaged and employed at their companies have to have a sense of purpose. They have to feel like they belong, and they have to have a way to express who they are in a safe place, in a safe way. And so our guest today, I'd like to introduce her, Maria Escobar Borden. She is the president of the Creating We Institute. And you might be asking, hey, what is the Creating We Institute? She's going to answer that question and a whole lot more. She is on the forefront working internationally with leaders, companies, CEOs, coaches, nonprofits, arts, social services, human performance consulting firms have used her, hired her, and deployed her. Every company size, every industry. She is the spokesperson and president for CIQ, which is Conversational Intelligence. It's a based methodology that transforms conversations and relationships. And if you listen to our statistics, we could really use that. So let me welcome our guest, Maria. Thank you so much for being the guest.
Sure.
Passionate to hear what you got to say.
Oh, thanks. I was astonished at the statistics you're stating, and I think in some cases it only gets worse.
Have you ever worked in a toxic environment?
Oh,
Or
yes, I
okay.
have. And however, something about me is that when I realize I'm not a fit, then I'm out of there. And
Oh, good.
so I do believe in staying and seeing what I can improve and seeing what I can help shift. But at some point, if it looks like nothing's going to happen, I move. But I've spent the bulk of my life in consulting in organizations, rather more of an entrepreneur by nature. And I've definitely coached and consulted within organizations that have cultures that I don't know that they would have said that they were toxic, but the levels of conflict and levels of miscommunication and the level of turnover were extraordinary. And there are some things that can, in some cases, very easily shift things. And we have more influence that in some cases than maybe people realize.
Most people have heard of what IQ is. A lot of people now know what EQ is, which is emotional intelligence, and it's a way of processing your emotions and in relationships and with yourself. But not a lot of people yet know what conversational intelligence is. And I would say that it is actually more powerful than some of these other things because it doesn't just change you and your response, you're actually changing other people. And so that may be a little bit of a teaser. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so conversational intelligence and because we were in an acronym world, CIQ is the acronym for conversational intelligence, is something that was developed by a woman named Judith E. Glaser. And it began from her conversations early on, from her childhood, where she was just noticing and watching how things went awry in conversations or how things were working or not working within her own sphere. That translated later on to her developing some sales courses to help salespeople really be able to be more effective at their work that really had to do with their conversations and how they were engaging in how they're establishing relationships. And she spent most of her work life consulting in organizations around what she called conversational intelligence and the ability to shift one's own way of processing or own way of dealing with conversations or interacting and the impact that it can have on others and the impact that it can have on productivity, impact that it can have on revenue and success. It all comes down to that. And EQ I guess the interesting thing about EQ and CIQ is that you can be emotionally intelligent but not be conversationally intelligent. But you can't be conversationally intelligent and not be emotionally intelligent. If you're conversationally intelligent, you have EQ as well, because it's just embedded in that. And so I see CIQ as more of the overarching thing and maybe less complex than trying to learn all of the strategies to make sure that I have my EQ, because it really does come down to interact with people, how we converse with people, and how we shift our own selves to make conversations better.
In conversations, first of all, communication, listeners, if you don't know this, the power of conversation is not in the speaker. You can say anything you want. That's not going to be a conversation worth having, because your listeners are going to filter, reinterpret what you say. So the power of all communication is going to be in the listener. So people who have conversational intelligence need to somehow take that into account and change how the people who are listening hear what they have to say. So tell me what that
Well, so
how that
it's,
works, because it sounds like magic. It almost sounds too good to be true.
I'd love to say it's magic, but being a very concrete kind of person. So when things get too airy fairy, I'm like, okay, this is not, woo, don't do that. But the thing about conversational intelligence when we're communicating, and yes, the meaning of things resides in the listener, not in the speaker. And it's not that as a listener, we're making things up, but we have different life experiences. We have different ways of hearing things. We have different experiences with words similar to what you are saying, and our brains are putting it through those filters. And so I might say the word meaning in something, and you think I'm talking about the definition of a word, when it turns out I'm thinking about what's the essence of, what does it mean, what's the impact on people. And then we're at a disconnect because we don't have the same interpretation. And not that there's a right interpretation or a wrong interpretation. Our brains interpret it the way that they interpret it. But it's incumbent on us as those that are communicating to stop and maybe ask a question. And what do you mean when you said you were going to pause this indefinitely? What did you mean by indefinitely? And then you get a chance to be able to come to a common agreement about what it means, which actually solves a whole lot of conflict. Most conflict is where our meanings are at loggerheads. And what we can do is understand our basic wiring, how we're wired to take in information, and not be judgmental about it necessarily, but also to understand that just because I'm thinking this way does not mean everybody else is. And again, no judgment on it. It's just we're a world of millions and millions of humans. So everyone is different.
And on top of that, if somebody doesn't feel like they're being listened to, do you trust that person? Do you want to share with that person? If you're in a meeting and you say something and you're honestly expressing yourself, and what someone else hears is something different, and they respond in a way that is maybe harsher or more dismissive, than like you don't feel like they actually heard what you were actually saying, the chances that I'm going to speak up in that meeting again would be almost nil. And to be honest, behind the scenes, I'd be like, oh my goodness, he's such a jerk. Like I would be bad mouthing him to other people because I got to process the fact that I was so dismissed and demoralized. But that happens in meetings all the time.
And then when you do that, you're also not listening to what's being
Oh,
said. Yeah.
no, you're thinking hate thoughts toward the person that did that to you. That guy from sales that is so arrogant, but you think he's arrogant. What if he's not arrogant? See, you've now created a story about this guy, and you'll never listen to him ever again.
Exactly. And part of that is also because when we listen, now, how many of us have been through communication courses? We all have, when we're told, okay, effective listening. To be an effective listener, you want to make sure that you are silent and you're not interrupting. You're going to make sure that your phone is off and you don't have distractions. You're going to ask a clarifying question. But the pieces that they don't address, those are all tactics. And they're great tactics. But what happens is we're focused on the intellectual content of what's being said. We're listening to the words and maybe what's the problem that they're saying, and we're not really taking a look at what the impact is on them or how they are experiencing it. As leaders or managers, we're listening to solve a problem because we think that's our job. We're going to give them a solution instead. And so when we just jump to a conclusion about what we're hearing, we wait for them to stop talking, and then we jump in and here's the solution. And the person says, but you're not listening. Yes, I'm paraphrasing back. Here's what you told me. Yeah, but you're not hearing me. What is it that it's not the words, it's the essence about what it is and the impact. And so when we talk in conversational intelligence about not just listening to understand the content, it's about listening to connect. And when you listen to connect, you are really paying attention to that person. You're not preparing what your answer is going to be. You're not preparing what question you're going to ask them as soon as they shut up. You're listening to what they're saying, and you will pick up cues like, oh, this is really stressful for you, I can tell. And then they're going, yes. And so people know, we all know when we're not being listened to. And we also know when we are being listened to. And there are times, hopefully maybe this happened to you, where you walk out and say, oh gosh, he really heard me. If you ask that person, well, what did he do that showed he really heard you? I don't know. I don't know exactly what he did. I just know that he heard me. It's something that we pick up, and it has to do with us knowing physically, or that energetic field that we have between ourselves, and not being woo, but there is one, that we notice when somebody's truly intentionally listening to us.
Well, I'm like you in the fact that like all that woo new agey feel good kind of stuff puts me a little bit on guard, but I will say this, there is an element of truth to that. And I will say this to our listening audience, have you ever walked into a room and just felt like you were being talked about? Right. And I've talked with speakers before. You can, as a speaker, professional speaker, you walk into a room and you can just feel whether it's a flat vibe, nourishing, exciting vibe, and you feed off of that. And it's not anything anyone said to you. There's no content knowledge, but there's an energy of connection or not connection. Or
There's actual science behind that. Definitely. And what happens though, when that happens, it's almost like a bucket of cold water is thrown on you. There's actually what they call social contagion or emotional contagion, where we can become dysregulated in the face of a person who's dysregulated. So if somebody's really anxious and at loggerheads, and we might just be feeling pretty neutral, if we engage with them, there's a fair chance that we're going to find ourselves in a defensive mode and also not regulated. And so we have a thing, we talk about this in conversational intelligence, our ability to self-regulate and keep ourselves in a neutral space wherever we can influence how we will converse and shift whether we say, that guy's a jerk, and oh boy, I'm not going to talk with them, when it could be that they're just having a bad day.
so having a little bit of neurological protection maybe before you land on a judgment,
Right.
whatever that looks like. What can you share about the neuroscience of that? Because we're
Well,
getting a lot of information about neurodiversity out in the ether world of workplace environments. And
right. I'll say two things. One, the concept of neurodiversity and neurodivergence.
okay,
And neuroscience can give explanations around that. So I'll talk about the neuroscience in a second. But as humans, every single one of us is different. So we could just say we're all neurodiverse. However, the term neurodivergent typically refers to people who don't process things or engage with things in a typical manner. I'm going to put typical in quotes,
okay,
but there's like how most people do. And so by being neurodivergent, it's hard for them to feel like they fit in. And people who are interacting say, that woman's just wacky. What's going on for her? And I have a family of great neurodivergence. And so I've been sensitized to this from the time my children were little. When it comes to neuroscience, And neurodivergence fits into the large umbrella of neuroscience.
Okay.
Conversational intelligence is based on neuroscience from the standpoint that there are certain things that our brains naturally do as part of the way we process information that we don't realize it's doing. It's humming in the background and doing it. For example, if something really stressful or shocking happens, all of a sudden, I'm a fight person, not a person. I put up my dukes and I'm ready to have it battle. My primitive brain has taken over. Our body, the primitive and limbic parts of our brain, their role is to keep us safe, to be scanning the landscape for anything that could be considered dangerous. In the old days, it was your saber-toothed tiger coming at me. Now it's in the workplace. Am I safe here? Am I safe
Or
here?
your spouse, maybe.
Or your spouse, exactly.
Right. I
Or
mean,
our
it could be close,
children. It could be anybody.
or your kid, even. Yeah.
But it's continually scanning for danger, and it can be anything. But when our brain senses danger, it sends an alert system to the rest of our body that says, alert, shut down your thought process because now it's time to protect. And so in that protect mode, we either, typical responses are we freeze, we flee, we fight, or we also talk now over the last 7 or 8 years or so about appeasing. So when we appease, especially in the workplace, when we just nod our heads, yeah, whatever you say, yeah, okay, I'm happy to do that. Happy to do that is a way of protecting ourselves. And so when we're in that mode, we cannot call on our prefrontal cortex, if I could just be scientific for a second, which is the part of our brain that is what they call executive functioning. Not that only executives have it, but it's basically where our complex thinking is and where we problem solve, where there's trust, we solve, we connect, we engage. But when we're feeling threatened, that part of our brain shuts off. And and we can't necessarily problem solve or make a connection with a person when we are in that mode, when we're in that protect mode. The thing that's most important, and I wish I would have learned this a long time ago, I learned it finally, which was good, is that we can't stop our primitive brain from doing those things. When it senses danger, it takes over. How many times, and I used to fight, it was verbal fighting. These things would come flying out of my mouth. And when I finally calmed down, I go, oh my God, why did I say that? And then I'd feel bad because I said it was my body's natural response. Now, I needed to learn how to temper that, and I have. It's a lot of practice. But if we can stop judging ourselves for feeling that way, but give ourselves the grace to say, okay, my brain thinks it needs to protect me. I need to call on my prefrontal cortex. Let me go for a quick walk. Let me take a sip of some hot tea. Let me listen to some calming music so that I can then engage in a more holistic way. And then we have some ability to influence that. But what gets in our way is that we don't realize that it's a natural part of how we are. And instead we judge ourselves.
You used
Yeah.
a term earlier in the conversation called regulation, self-regulation, up-regulating, down-regulating.
Right.
When you're aware of what's happening to yourself and your own body, how do you make that determination? What do you need to regulate? Like, how do you know what to regulate? Because you know what's happening. It's natural. Your body's designed to
Yeah.
do
To do
exactly what
that.
it's supposed to do.
Right. And so when our body detects danger, there's normally an infusion of cortisol in our body. And cortisol is not a bad hormone at all, but it is the one that causes great stress. It's what happens when we're stressed or we sense danger. And when we can find ways of reducing that amount of cortisol and bringing in oxytocin being the bonding hormone. Some people call it the love hormone, but it really is the hormone that enables us to create connections with others. If we can find a way of letting that oxytocin increase, it helps. That can be done by watching a cute video on YouTube, little puppy dogs sauntering around. I just watched a video this morning that I'm going to flag. It was a baby in a hospital who was just laughing hysterically and for no reason. And everybody around him, the baby was laughing, and people were walking by and coming in and laughing. And that watching that infused me with this oxytocin. I said, oh, that's so cute. That then enables us to call onto that part of the brain where we can process more effectively. So being able to upregulate oxytocin or downregulate the cortisol is helpful. There are articles out there with a lot of different things to think about. We each have our own strategies. But when that happens, I believe the most important thing we can do is figure out, how can I increase my oxytocin and reduce my cortisol before I open my mouth
Oh,
and
that's
say
always the
something that I
trick.
wish I didn't
Always the trick.
say, or before I fly out the door. And it takes practice, but it helps.
I think it stays in your body longer as well, doesn't
It
it?
and
So
it depends on the circumstance. Yes, it tends to last longer, and partly the amount of time that it takes depends on how much we perseverate over what just happened. If we're continually thinking about it and worried about it and revisiting it, that cortisol level is staying high. If we can interrupt the pattern and watch a funny video or go for a walk, get out in nature, or give a hug to somebody, then that raises the oxytocin and maybe that neutralizes it does last longer. And there are ways for us to shorten it many times.
Hello, friends. Thanks for listening. A Squared Lamp Groups powers this podcast. Their memberships are tax-deductible donations that directly support their work developing people and organizations. But just for you, they're offering podcast listeners a special 40% off coupon code to join. Your benefits as a member include additional resources, perks, and access that you can use all year, including an additional 30 minutes of bonus podcast content for every episode. Simply use the code 4listeners at checkout. That's the number 4, all caps, listeners at checkout. They also are giving our listeners free gifts to use now. Go to their website, asquaredlamps.org/podcast, and download your free My Success Course of Action worksheet. There is no cost, registration, or sales pitch involved. Just click it and save. Use it to work on something significant to you this month, maybe even something that sparks interest from today's podcast. Then click to join our free but private Stop Digging Podcast LinkedIn group, where the conversation continues between you, the hosts, and our guests. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. And now, back to the program.
what you were talking about, the social emotion that can spread. I forget the terminology.
Emotional
Social contagion.
contagion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the baby laughing, right? The famous smile test, where we have these brain cells that are mirror brain cells, where in this famous smile test, I can smile at you and without even knowing it, you'll start smiling back at me. And imagine it activates those brain cells because our bodies are made to connect with other people. And so if we're not conscious of that and conscious of being intentional about connecting, we're actually doing our humanity a little bit of
A
disservice.
disservice.
Yeah.
Well, and it also can happen on the flip side, though.
Mm.
And so, going back to what I was saying before, if I'm faced with a person that's just got daggers coming at me, I've had this happen. Now I know what to do with it. When I see it, my first thought is, okay, it's not about you. It's not about you. Don't step back and look like you're afraid, but just stop and listen to what they're saying. And so by having this in my head, I will then just stop and listen, but I'm doing it from a more neutral spot. I'd love to say that I learned how to do that overnight. I didn't. I learned from a lot of practice having done it, but it still happens to me today when I'm walking in the neighborhood and I see somebody go, hi, and they turn around and they're just angry. I'm going, oh, okay, it's not about, no,
I
it can't be
take
about
back my
me.
high.
Yeah, exactly. Never mind. I don't think I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Don't yell at me.
Never mind.
Let me pull up my no, but then I literally just say, okay, just stay neutral. Oh, yeah, you seem upset. Then by doing that, then I have the chance actually of influencing them to downregulate what's going on for them, which many times has nothing to do with me. It has to do with something that something that just annoyed them or something happened that's not related. So yeah.
Oh, so I love what you just said right there, because that to me is the essence and the power of the conversational intelligence is that when you have figured out how to up or down regulate your own neurological self and hormonal self and brain cell self to not mirror or increase whatever the situation is, you then all of a sudden have the power to help them to deregulate their toxicity.
Exactly.
It's an intentional opportunity. And I love that because that is really the essence. That's powerful.
It is. And, going back to something you said earlier about the level of toxicity that leaders create in organizations, frankly, sometimes what the leader is doing is not being intentionally power over or intentionally toxic. They're not being heard. And so if we can put ourselves in a neutral position with them, sometimes they'll downregulate with you. And so again, we have more influence over that. The funny thing that comes up about this, and I hear this regularly, say, why am I always the one that has to do these things? Why can't other people do these things?
Right.
In the perfect world, and our goal, our aspiration is that everybody, but it has to start from somewhere. And why shouldn't it start with us? If we can figure out how to stay regulated and stay in a conversation and not assume that what's happening is about us, and ask ourselves, what else could it be besides what I'm thinking right now? I'm thinking this person is a major jerk and needs to be out of my neighborhood, but what else could it be besides what they're saying? Then we're able to really help those around us regulate ourselves, and we stay regulated ourselves because we're not all caught up in this narrative that we've invented to protect ourselves.
The bottom line for me is just anything that you can do to take back your own power is powerful. Our nonprofit focuses on empowerment of people and particularly workers, but also startups and things like that. One of the statistics I didn't get to and didn't read was the retention rate, how long people stay at jobs. And for older people over 50 who are working, it's a little bit longer, an average of about 4.2 years. And also, if you're in the public sector, it's about 6 years. But younger people under 50 who are in the workplace, their retention rate is much lower. And it is the lowest among minorities. And so I think we work with a lot of male and female people from all over the world. But if you're an African American woman and you're sitting in a boardroom and you're hearing things very differently. So even if the leader is being sensitive and using the right words, it's landing differently on you. So how can you take back your power without feeling like I don't belong here and they're judging me? Like you have to like taking back your power is to downregulate and ask the other questions to help to control them, the people who are speaking, right? So you actually can take back that power in a conversation and then decide, is it
Yeah, yes. And I would also say that we sometimes make an assumption when we hear something that it's about what we think it is. I say this as a Latina person. I'm bicultural as a Mexican. Our family was the only Mexican family in the town we were living with, one of the towns we lived with. I lived in Mexico for a number of years. And regardless of what you think I look like, which throws people off a lot, you should see my brother Miguel Escobar, who's an Irish redhead. But sometimes it's not about what we think. And so people can't take our power if we don't give it to them. And so someone may be trying to power over us. And if we can stay with our own sense of power and not necessarily get into combat with them over it, but maybe to understand or to state my position. I understand what you're saying. Here's what I would add to that. And here's why I say that to do the advocating, but do it from a sense of not assuming that it was necessarily an intentional thing. I find, and research supports this many times, not always certainly, but not everybody is as biased as sometimes people perceive from the standpoint of intentional negative bias. But it's important for us to understand that our brains are wired to put things into categories and buckets. We can't survive with all of the information that we are taking in on a daily basis, everything we hear, everything we see, everything we're processing. If our brains didn't put them into categories, we would fall apart. We would be not able to function. But the buckets they get put into, sometimes we don't even realize that they are. An example, a couple of months ago, I had a plumbing problem. I sent an email to the plumber and say, "Hey, I've got this problem. Can you send somebody over?" Great. And they said, "Tracy's coming." Great. And so a couple of days go by, hear a knock on the door, open the door. This big burly man says, "Hi, I'm here to fix your plumbing." I'm going, "You're a guy." Because Tracy, in my mind, was a female, and I didn't even realize why that was. And of course, he looked at me like, "Whoa,
Of course I am.
why are you doing this?"
Yeah.
And so I explained. I said, "I'm sorry. I have my goddaughter's at Tracy. I have two friends that are women that are Tracy. For some reason, I had Tracy." So this was a bucket that my brain created, a category that said all Tracys are female. They're not. But many of our biases are coming from buckets that were unintentionally created that we need to bust, and where we can also be non-judgmental about ourselves when we have them, but fix it. That's important. But our brains can't function if we didn't do that.
And if we're defending what we don't know that we don't know. I was trying to remember the name of it while you were talking too. Is that there was a TV show like a Brain Buster or something like that. And I remember all of their episodes. It's funny how brains work, because what you were saying, our brains would be overloaded if we could track everything around us, even just sitting in our room, right? We actually filter out about 80% of what's around us. And they gave examples of this in this show. I wish I could remember the name. I'll try to post it in the Stop Digging site if I can remember it. But they had people where they would change something in the environment, like they put a chicken in a window, or they would do these odd things, but people weren't expecting it, so they weren't looking for it. They would literally block out almost everything. And even if they studied a photo, there were certain things that they would remember about the photo, but everything else they couldn't remember. And we all do that. We think we know where we are. We think we know where our environment is. We think we know the people that are around us and that we've picked up everything, even if the content, the color of the hair, the height, the skin color, the family story or whatever. But we're also filtering out 80% of stuff that we're not even noticing because our brains just can't process it. Essentials.
Yeah, it's like when you decide you're going to go buy a car. My beloved Prius is 12 years old. But when I decided I was going to buy a Prius, all of a sudden they're all over the place. I'd never noticed it. It's not like overnight, all of a sudden everybody was buying Priuses. I had just never noticed them because I didn't have a filter for that.
That's true. And the other thing I tell people too is if you look in the mirror and you just stare at one aspect of your face over and over and just constantly you'll start growing. Like what you focus on grows and you see it, and then you start noticing it everywhere else. But your nose hasn't changed. Your ear hasn't changed. The number of Priuses around you hasn't changed. Red cars haven't changed. But when you get it in your brain to focus on that thing, you see it everywhere. Real or not, you still see it everywhere, whether there are actually red Priuses going around or whether your nose is actually big, right? It could be perception, but it also could be reality. But all of a sudden, you notice it all. And I think that's the same thing in conversations. And it can be spoken or unspoken. I remember early on in my career, how I would hold a meeting and I thought I was being very gracious and open to everything. And at the end, I would say, do you agree, disagree? What do you think? Not much. Nobody disagreed. So I thought I had buy-in. I thought everybody was on board. And what happened? We left the meeting and guess who did everything?
Yeah.
Right? Nobody did their part. Nobody. And what that did for me is it made me really angry and it made me distrust all of them. So next time I was like, in my mind, I was thinking, you're lazy, you're a weasel, you make up all these names of reasons why they didn't do it. But the reality is that just because I was communicating content and no one spoke up to create that battle.
Silence is not
Right.
assent.
So they were hearing what they thought was going on and were having different reactions that they didn't feel comfortable sharing one way or another. And
And if we're conversationally intelligent, we're not looking for the cues, right? We should be
we're
looking for the
slowing it
cues.
down and we're asking, we're observing, we're saying, I noticed that you've been staring at your notes nonstop for looked at me once. What's up with that? Let's talk about that. You have some thoughts. So having those inquiries and interactions to connect, like you were saying, listening and interacting and conversing to connect.
Connect. Yeah.
And even if
That
they don't agree with you, you've built trust. So the outcome doesn't have to be agreement or even understanding per se. I will never understand completely what an African American man has gone through. I can't. How can I? You're a different person. But
But you
I
can
can trust.
try instead. You by listening, you stand under their reality with
Right. So
them.
we can build trust.
Right.
So we can share our experiences in a way that isn't going to offend or hurt or destroy that trust. And each side can feel heard and connect, that connecting thing. So I love that. And I wish there's been so much research on how trust affects performance in companies. I
Oh,
can't remember offhand. You may know some
it
statistics or
it
examples, but
it I don't know what they could put percentages on it, but mistrust and distrust is easy to create and hard to overcome. And trust is actually easy to create. We just forget to do it or we don't pay attention to doing it. And sometimes we're caught up in our own thing. But that example you gave about assuming that people, because I didn't say anything, everybody was on board and was okay with the
yeah, what's
task, one
wrong
of
with
those
them? Right?
conversational blind spot. And by doing that, by making that assumption, what does that do to trust? There's another blind spot I want to mention because this one is prevalent and it can be really hurtful. And we just don't realize we're doing it, is that we believe that we understood what you said. But our takeaway really is how I felt about what you said. So if you say something and it really pisses me off, then what I remember is I'm angry about that, and not that you had a very seamless little way of saying something. It was more my reaction. It's like years, and I tell people this story because it's like years ago, there was a sister of mine said, I was wearing a yellow dress. You never wear yellow. And I go, yeah, I never wear yellow. And then I walked away and go, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't be wearing this. And so I stopped wearing this yellow dress. I loved it. And fast forward a couple of years, she goes, how come you never wear that yellow dress? And I said, because you said I didn't look good in it. She goes, I didn't say that. I go, yeah, you did. Remember I was wearing it? She goes, no, I just said you never wear yellow. But I interpreted it to mean, oh, I look terrible in yellow. And that I took away how I felt about what she said, which weren't her words at all.
I'm just flashing into everyone's marriage right now and what the like even between male and female people
Yes.
who actually love you and having those conversations. I didn't say I didn't like that dinner.
So tell me what you mean by that. So you said this. Can you tell me what you mean by that so I make sure I'm understanding, and how often what they say is completely the opposite of what you thought? Oh, think of how, if we did that, think of how much conflict would be neutralized before it even happened.
I love that. I'd love to see that more in workplaces because I do feel like you spend so much time at work and interacting with people. Just having better relationships is key. And not just in workplaces and at your home, but we're talking internationally. You have a great quote. I want you to share that quote and maybe say it twice because I really want people to hear this quote and really listen to what it's saying.
Yeah, I'd love to. I wish that this were my quote, but this is a quote from Judith Glazer. And if you've picked up her book or see things about her, we have this all over our website. And the quote is this: to get to the next level of greatness depends on the quality of the culture, which depends on the quality of the relationships, which depends on the quality of the conversations. Everything happens through conversations. So it starts with conversations.
So if you're in a toxic environment and you're a leader and you want to start creating a culture of trust and performance and greatness, You
You're
gotta,
showing
yeah.
up.
How are you showing up? Start with those conversations. If I'm a leader and I want to get trained in this, where can I go?
Yeah, we offer training programs that are what we call immersive, because the intention is not just taking all this information intellectually. You don't walk out with it. Here are the 5 steps that you must do, because there are no 5 steps. It depends on the conversation. But it's really about how do you become able to have conversations in this way. We have a website, and I'll give that to you. You're welcome to post, where we list our programs. We don't offer programs that have thousands of people that come. They're small cohorts, but it really is about changing conversations one person at a time. And people walk out of those programs, even though we tell people your conversations will shift, and they walk in, I don't believe you. Yeah, huh? And right around the 3rd session, people are going, oh, yeah, you're right. And they see the shifts. And they're simple little things. But yes, it can make a huge difference. And my mission is to help conversations everywhere, not just in the workplace, but everywhere. The
Love
world
that.
needs it.
Let me ask you this, because I have some curiosity, because conversations have to do with language. What does CIQ look like in other languages or cross culturally? How does it work, and are there different components to what you do?
What's interesting, we have certified and accredited coach consultants around the world in every country. And although there may be cultural nuances to certain things, people's general experiences around conversations and relationships are the same. Our wiring is the same. Our need as a human to connect with others is the same. The cultural norms may shift what that looks like and how that plays out. But being able to listen, to connect, to be able to self regulate, to recognize when the wrong part of my brain is in charge instead of the one that's more partnering, all of that is the same. And so it changes conversations, which change relationships, and it fits within the culture and how people work in their culture. It's proven to be very universal.
I love that sometimes we get these methodologies that don't often translate into another culture. This is so neurologically based and human reality based that it can be planted anywhere.
Right.
It's not a hothouse plant methodology. It's a methodology that can be applied wherever you are in whatever culture
The
in
human
the world.
factor. Yeah, and having said that, there may be terms that they would call it something different. So it's not about memorizing a term and using this term. It's about how it fits within the culture that you're in or the family that you're in. I like one of the terms Judith uses, which is an important one, where you would talk about double clicking, where when you want to make sure that you're understanding, you say, tell me what you mean by that when you say the word meaning. That's what she calls we call a double click. There's an organization where I said that word and they about showed me the door, because we do not use that term with us. But we describe it in a way that's different. The concept is, if you to make sure that we're understanding, ask, what do you mean by this? So that you can understand the difference. This is a big cultural thing. We're a multicultural team, and we're regularly going like this sometimes in a conversation. And if we finally stop and say, okay, what do you mean by that? Tell me what you're referring to. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's a German thing. Germans do it this. Oh, that's not how we do it. And then we laugh and we come to our common meaning. So again, take away maybe nothing other than know your regulation. How do you stay regulated? And double click. What can be solved.
I love that. So we will include your website, because when you get those skills, you're actually helping to change the world around you, because
It starts
you all of
with
a sudden have
you.
the power to help others regulate themselves in a conversation. And so that's hugely powerful. We can get a bunch of people to learn these skills and share them. You are
Oh, it would
changing the
be.
culture of wherever you are. I think that's great. And it is part of that, just owning your own personal and professional development. You need to own
Exactly.
it, because if you don't name it, if you don't own it, you're not intentional about it, you're just not going to grow. And we live in a world that's very distrustful, I think.
And it doesn't need to, we do need to protect ourselves. but there are things that we can do in our spheres of influence that can shift that. As I said, I wish I would have learned some of these things earlier. I'm glad I learned them when I did.
When we feel connected with people and when we have a core group of people that we can trust and feel like we belong, I think that so much of the isolation and things that what
Yeah.
we're seeing in our world right now, particularly among young people, but not exclusively. Some countries are higher than others with suicide, but there's huge
Disconnect, right.
self-punishment, feelings of isolation, or even just not caring because you don't think anyone cares for you. And I think there's that element of trust and connection doesn't make our lives feel so desperate.
And it starts with I.
It starts
I
with
moved,
I.
yeah, I
Yeah.
to move on, moving from I to we.
I'm excited. I am so glad that you came on, and we just touched
Thank
the
you for
surface.
having me. Oh, I
Well, we
know.
just touched the surface. We could we might have you back, or
I'd love that.
bring your team back, and we'll just watch you guys argue and learn how it's done the
We
right way
have
in
some
a
great
positive, connected way.
conversations.
So I think that our listeners will put the website up in our posts, but if you want to share your website one more time.
It's where you'll find information about the programs. It's www.we-iq.com. And
Perfect.
the company's website is creatingwe.com.
Okay, very good. Listeners, try to visit their website and just check it out, see what you like, and just learn what you can. And for our members of A Squared Lamp groups, we actually have bonus content. If you join us as a member, you're actually helping support our work and training and consulting to help other people one on one to get where they need to go. Your membership is tax deductible, but if you join as a member, one of the benefits you get is an additional 30 minutes of bonus content for all of our podcasts. So we're going to delve into some extra fun stuff with Maria here. She is also an owner of a bookstore,
I
and we're going to
was an owner.
was an owner. So we're
Yeah.
we're going to talk a little bit about her business ownership and all of that stuff. Stay tuned if you're an A Squared member. If you're not an A Squared member, join. And for everybody else, we are so thankful that you listen to us. Subscribe, share this podcast with anyone that you know. And it's free. Just let people know that there's an important conversation that might be a little fun or interesting and learn something. So thank you so much, Maria, and hang tight.
Thank you for listening to the Stop Digging podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please like, subscribe, and share with a friend, and connect with us on our social media channels. This podcast is powered by asquaredlamps.org.